So I watched a really interesting film the other night, a debut feature from the man with the name of Randy Moore. It is a film that has a production history which is equally as intriguing as its plot, involving some pretty risky guerrilla filmmaking and a story that dares to send out a glaring anti-Disney message, which is always commendable in my eyes. I'm talking of course about the 2013 fantasy horror film titled Escape from Tomorrow. Mostly shot in Disney World and Disneyland without the park's permission, edited in South Korea in order to stay off the Disney Corporation's radar, and with the whole crew being unsure whether the film would even be released, it's pretty safe to say that Escape from Tomorrow is quite the accomplishment, at least in terms of its production. Knowing all of this while going into the film, I felt a little skeptical as to how the actual film would turn out. Would it just be a massive mess with terrible camera work that unintentionally resembles the found footage style? Or would it be a surprisingly enjoyable ride that even goes into the territory of surrealism? Thankfully, it was the latter. We follow around a seemingly normal family that just wants to do pretty much what any family would want to do on this sort of holiday. Enjoy the park and what it has to offer while spending quality time together. But the experience doesn't really start off very smoothly, with the father being fired over the phone, his son being rude to him for no apparent reason, and the whole atmosphere being falsely cheerful. It seems like it's going to be one of those family holidays that just doesn't work out. However, it becomes much more than that. The whole facade of appearing happy and careless through forced positivity and escaping reality becomes the prevalent theme here, with either corrupt or selfish thoughts occupying the father's mind constantly, despite being in the happiest place on earth. This obviously calls for some very captivating surrealistic imagery, that also transitions into surprisingly well executed horror. Even if these scenes don't necessarily scare, they sure as hell provide a very unsettling atmosphere. Despite having scenes like this, the film also transitions into these grand Disney-esque sequences, as well as comedy which I really didn't expect, mostly thanks to Roy Abramson's performance as the father.
Hey, Sarah.
Look at this. Come on.
What? Come on.
No, put it back. Come on.
I got this sort of Nicolas Cage vibe from him. At times he's pretty damn good, and at other times his acting comes off as really awkward, but in this quirky, comical sense which seems to work out for him in terms of comedy and as a character. Eclectic is probably the best word to use in order to describe the genre and acting in this film. But you can't really blame the actors that much for any slip-ups given the circumstances in which they had to be filmed. But saying that, everyone actually pulls it off quite well. Besides, these switches between genres and types of acting somehow just work, partly due to the self-aware nature of this film. It never seems to really take itself too seriously, despite providing a rather extraordinary experience and commentary that I can certainly approve of. For me, it actually makes this whole project even more likable given the context of its ridiculous yet impressive production history. Almost every aspect of this film can be simultaneously praised and criticized. The cinematography is simply gorgeous at times. Some of the shots they manage to capture while being sneaky is beyond impressive. But there are a few obvious uses of green screen with compositions that just seem questionable, especially since the hard-to-film shots are so much better in comparison. There is this whole intermission segment which actually goes into the sci-fi route. Yeah, as if the mix of genres wasn't eclectic enough. Despite serving a purpose in the plot, it does feel somewhat forced and out of place. However, it does provide even more enjoyable surrealism, which ultimately doesn't make it feel completely unnecessary. Clearly the positives outweigh the negatives here, especially visually. Even though the acting isn't perfect, the choice of actors feels perfect even if for their faces alone. This might sound a bit strange, but these specific faces actually help complement the Disney-like sense of magic and wonder quite a lot. There's even a Scarlett Johansson lookalike that appears throughout the film, which was certainly a pleasure to look at. Apart from the visuals though, the soundtrack obviously adds a lot to the enchanting tone of the film. It almost feels like the ultimate Disney symphony at times. But it turns out that these are actually all original compositions. For the most part. I definitely felt a heavy influence of Angelo Badalamenti in there. But the whole enchanting soundtrack and the strangely captivating faces undoubtedly fit in very well and help to create that unnerving contrast between the overly happy tone and the corruption that hides behind it. It really is an important detail because you can't really create an effective satire without implementing something from the source material in a dignified manner. I just really like what Randy Moore accomplished here. Partly in a guilty pleasure kind of way, but mostly in a sort of enjoyable, surrealistic journey kind of way. The most basic way to sum up my reaction to this film would be to say, this is really fucking weird, but I love it. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.